In this video, I'll share with you 5 of the top fasting mistakes, some of the most common reasons why people don't achieve the results they should, end up missing out on key benefits, or even give up completely. The principle of intermittent fasting is so simple. You consume all your calories during a compressed time frame and eat nothing for the remainder of the day. Pretty difficult to get wrong, you'd think. But what you eat when you're not fasting, so during your eating window, will have a huge impact on the ease and effectiveness of your fasts. And then while you're fasting, there are so many things that can subtly spike your insulin and knock you out of ketosis. In some cases, disappointing weight loss results may even come down to something as simple and seemingly benign as not getting enough sleep or not consuming enough salt. The point is, there are plenty of ways in which you could be going wrong, so if you've just started fasting and are either finding it extremely difficult or wondering why you're not losing weight more quickly, one of these common mistakes may well apply to you. Okay, the first mistake is simply not consuming enough healthy foods during your eating window, which sounds obvious, but it's still a very common mistake and may therefore take a little bit of planning and awareness to avoid. The issue is that when you've gone for a long period of time without food, when you eventually do eat, you're far more likely to go for the tasty, calorie-dense foods first, which is an issue because fasting causes a reduction in stomach distensibility, which simply means that it shrinks due to the lack of food and can't expand as much as it did before. This means you get full quickly and may have no desire to consume your greens. The solution is to consume more fats as they're calorie dense at 9 calories per gram and therefore take up much less space, meaning you should have plenty of room for your veggies. Fats also take far longer to be digested and have almost no effect on insulin, meaning you'll feel less hungry and more energetic during your next fasting window. Of course, there's a much simpler way to get your veggies in, and that's to eat them first, which is perhaps not the most appealing option if you haven't eaten anything for the last 18 hours, but if you've got the self-discipline, it's probably the best way to go. Okay, the second common and detrimental mistake that people make is adding coffee and tea creamers, including full-fat milk, low-fat milk, almond milk, soy, and powdered creamers of all descriptions. As far as the body is concerned, anything with calories is essentially food, but most people don't see it that way and think they can get away with a splash of milk in their tea. Unfortunately though, and this is a tough pill to swallow if you can't stand black coffee and tea, but consuming calories elicits a metabolic response, so even if you consume a tablespoon of low-fat milk containing around 10 calories, you are technically breaking your fast, which means putting a stop to burning stored energy, aka fat, and switching over to food energy, which we obviously don't want. So avoid creamers at all costs and maybe start working on acquiring a taste for black coffee instead. Okay, the third mistake that many people make when intermittent fasting is not drinking enough water. We all know the importance of hydration in general, but it's something you'll need to put even more thought into when fasting due to a brilliant process called autophagy, which refers to the recycling of old or damaged components within the cells. Now, this is an extremely healthy process that's been associated with a reduction in cancers and an increase in longevity, and occurs when fasting because the body doesn't have surplus calories with which to make new cells, so instead repairs old ones. But how does this relate to hydration? Well, as these damaged cell components are broken down, some slightly toxic byproducts are released which need to be flushed out of the body via the urine. Also, since fasting allows time for glucose-induced inflammation to subside, a lot of water may be lost from the cells, particularly if you've recently started fasting, making drinking even more important. A simple solution to this problem is keeping a big 2-litre water bottle with you throughout the day and sipping regularly. Also, you can keep an eye on the colour of your urine and increase your fluid intake if it's any darker than this. Okay, so number 4 is not consuming enough minerals like magnesium, potassium, and most importantly sodium or salt. Salt is essential for cellular function, but cannot be stored in the body for any length of time, so when we fast, sodium levels will gradually decline and need to be replaced, particularly if we've been drinking lots of water, as this would dilute and lower sodium concentrations even more. It may sound surprising, but often fatigue or hunger on a fast can be quickly resolved by simply taking a pinch of salt with a glass of water. To prevent your sodium levels from falling, why not add, say, 1/4 teaspoon of salt to the water bottle that you'll have with you throughout the day? If you're concerned about the health implications of consuming salt, subscribe to the channel and look out for an upcoming video on the topic. Okay, we're on our 5th and final intermittent fasting mistake, which is perhaps the most important, but also the most difficult to avoid for many people, and that is consuming too many refined carbohydrates and sugars during your eating window, particularly the last meal in the lead up to your fast. The reason for this is that the more of these foods you consume, the greater the rise in blood glucose and insulin, and the greater the rise, the longer it takes for levels to return to baseline. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that when insulin is elevated, you're unable to produce ketones from fat. So by eating a huge plate of pasta right before you start fasting, it would take you much longer to resume burning body fat than if you'd gone for a low-carb alternative instead. This, of course, means you'd spend less time burning stored energy and more time burning food energy. Not a good outcome if you're trying to lose weight. Another issue is that carbs, and particularly sugars, are far less satiating and more addicting than fats and proteins, which is why you can eat way more of things like French fries or bread than you can of eggs, meat, or green vegetables in the absence of carbs. This means you're likely to consume more calories too, perhaps without even knowing it. Now, consuming too many refined carbs can also make your fasts quite difficult to endure, because whenever there's a big spike in blood glucose, the body tends to overcompensate by lowering glucose to below baseline levels. In other words, in its urgency to remove the harmful glucose from the blood, it takes out more than it needs to, leading to the so-called sugar crash that comes after a heavy meal, and subsequently hunger and a stronger urge to eat. Now, with all this in mind, the solution is quite clear. Ideally, cut out sugar, refined grains and starches, and replace them with low glycemic foods like meat, eggs, and green vegetables. If you're not prepared to give up carbs completely, eat them towards the start of your eating window and keep the final meal clean. So to summarize, make sure you consume enough healthy foods rich in minerals and micronutrients. Stay away from coffee and tea creamers when fasting. Make sure you drink plenty of water, particularly during your fasting window. Take salt, and avoid sugar and refined carbohydrates during your eating window, particularly the last meal before you start fasting. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the channel, and please leave a comment if I missed out anything major or you'd like to share your own experiences with intermittent fasting. I genuinely love to hear about it. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.